The Five Paths of Enlightenment for Man, the Doctor. Today will be the first in a 5-part series where we discuss the different paths of enlightenment that most human beings go through. The first of this is the Doctor. This is a water path. The second is the Artist, which is an air path. The third is the Warrior, which is a fire path. The fourth is the Devotee, which is an earth path. And the fifth is the Trader, which is an Akashic path. Now, the Doctor learns through suffering and its relief. Phrases and watchwords like insight through suffering inform what it is they do. Now, in their case, this is largely a mix of learning about karma, technology, and the utilization of memory. Or as some people like to say, law and medicine are memory. Okay, this is pretty interesting. Now, where you get into this is by working with patients. They are attempting to alleviate and prevent this suffering from either continuing or occurring in the first place. And this is how they learn about karma. Additionally, through the application of medicine and its various tools, they learn about technology. But fundamentally, what they're doing is based in memory, specifically the ability to identify patterns of illness and suffering, and then apply the appropriate tools in order to alleviate them. 2, this is a full-time profession. Okay, if you're talking about someone's path in life, this is what they spend the majority of their time working on in pursuit of this kind of enlightenment, and is almost always the result of prior life planning before they incarnate. Now, what are examples of this in the West? Obviously, you have a medical doctor. In more recent years, you have things like chiropractors or acupuncturists, nurses, physician's assistants, nurse practitioners. Depending upon the society you're in, it can even be pharmacists if they're allowed to treat patients directly. These are examples of, in Western society, what constitutes the path of the doctor. Now, in Asia, you also end up with more traditional things like traditional medicine, moxibustion, acupuncture, this kind of thing. Again, keeping in mind the full-time pursuit of these individuals is the relief of suffering. In less developed societies, you get into the role of shamanism, barefoot doctors, herbalists, these kinds of things. It's a little less common in developed societies these days because honestly, the amount of intelligence and training, notice I didn't necessarily say education, required to do these things has developed to that point in more developed societies. Keeping in mind, this is the primary purpose behind someone's life. So yes, in theory, an energy healer, their path in life, could be one of the doctor. But this is not somebody who took a weekend Reiki course and does this upon occasion. This is somebody who does this full time. And on an esoteric level, you get involved with systems like the Ermine Mountain Sudden Enlightenment System, or its corollaries in order to do this. All right, now what else do we have? The primary challenges for a doctor largely involve empathy and frustration. When you work with people who are sick, one of the primary challenges is that illness is unique to the individual, but the illness itself is not unique. So doctors have to ride this line where they have enough empathy to properly treat the patient without having the empathic nature of the patient's suffering overwhelm them. Because again, they're doing this a lot. This isn't a occasional event. This isn't something that happens a few times in their life. This is something they do full time. So balancing those two needs involving empathy enough to treat the patient without being overwhelmed by the patient's suffering is a real challenge. This is also particularly challenging for people who use energetic or esoteric means to heal people. because there's that karmic feedback between the patient and the doctor. It's very easy for the doctor to take parts of this suffering onto themselves and eventually become ill in the process. This is very well understood in energetic healing circles, but it also applies in conventional medicine as well. Keeping in mind the egregores from these illnesses, the energetic background of that, not to mention the more mechanical aspects of things like bacterial and viral infections, are something that these people are surrounded by all the time. And it can be very wearing mentally, let alone energetically, if they're not very careful with it. Now, frustration is a part of medicine that doctors don't really like to discuss with lay people very much. Again, you've got that mental, you've got that energetic, you've got that empathic nature of feedback. But unfortunately, depending upon the technology you have available to you, frequently you can't solve a problem. In a lot of cases, you can make something better, but ultimately healing the patient completely may simply not be possible. Even today in Western society, if someone loses their arm, we can't give them a new one as of right now. And that doesn't get into the fact that ultimately, as of 2024, when this video was recorded, if you were born, you will eventually die. This can become very frustrating over a long period of time for doctors. In Western parlance, this is referred to as burnout. In a more practical matter, it's simply people quit because they can't deal with all the frustration involved in not being able to help people. Because ultimately, as part of that empathy, a good doctor wants to help his patient. That's almost universal when dealing with these people. And it's something that has to be preserved and protected. Because if you beat one of these people down long enough, sooner or later they just quit. And in acupuncture in particular, it's very common to see someone who practices for 10 or 20 years and then just wakes up one morning and decides they simply can't do it anymore. So keep that in mind when you're dealing with someone on the path of a doctor. Now, we've talked about the path of the doctor today, and we briefly mentioned the other paths of the warrior, the artist, the devotee, and the trader. Someone's path in life is their primary pursuit. However, under the right set of circumstances, they can become involved in the actions of the other paths. Now, this will be an exception, obviously, but keep in mind human beings are dynamic. I've known several doctors who spent an entire career in the military before going to medical school. So clearly they pursued the path of the warrior first and then moved over to the path of the doctor. Additionally, doctors in retirement sometimes become artists, so on and so on and so on. Most commonly what you'll see is doctors mix the path of the doctor with the path of the devotee, where they go out and do a lot of volunteer work in retirement. So, something to keep in mind. Again, you've got your primary thing, but you can do other aspects of this in your movement forward in development as an individual. Okay, so finally, we need to get into the skills required to be a good doctor. Okay, in terms of enlightenment and in terms of esoterica, this of course involves many of the skills involved in the 60 Skills Master Course. Things like clairsentience develop empathy. Things like clairvoyance allow you to more clearly see conditions. Working with things like the letter A from Barden's Kabbalah will enhance your memory and make you better at doing your job. So these are all examples of how the Master Course curriculum, the 60 some odd skills, directly influence what goes on in pursuing your path of enlightenment. So if you like the topic of today's discussion, please give us a like and consider subscribing to the channel. If you'd like to learn more about all of this, go to 60skills.com. Otherwise, as per usual, train hard and be well.